Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky, and I welcome you to this iChess webinar regarding my recent video called the Naroditsky method. So first things first, it would be great if people could give me a bit of an assurance that the audio is fine and that you can see my face and that the technology is working okay, because this is my first time doing a webinar. So I'd like to make sure that everything is fine before we proceed. So I'm going to go back to the chat and I'll see. Let's see whether or not people can hear me. So let's see. So let me know if you can hear me. Sounds good. If I get a few people saying that the audio is okay, I'll proceed. So let's see. One person says it sounds okay. Anybody else have any comments about the audio? Sound and looks good. Perfect. So let's get started in that case. Okay, great. So apparently people can hear me. So first of all, a quick introduction. My name is Grandmaster Daniel Naroditsky, as you probably know. I am here in my dorm room at Stanford University, so the view is not going to be amazing. I'm not in the Louvre. I'm not in Rome. I'm in just a regular dorm room. But the important thing that we'll be doing today is the real view is going to be the chessboard, not my face. So enjoy my face while you can see it, and then soon enough you'll be seeing only the chessboard. So what are we going to be doing today for this hour and 5-10 minutes? Well, as you might know, I recently released a 15-hour course called the Naroditsky method in collaboration with iChess. And basically this course details my entire chess philosophy starting from square one. And it's divided up into a bunch of different chapters where I present my views on all of the chess subjects in opening, middle game, and end game, and psychology that I consider to be important. And it's a very ambitious project, and the video series was released about, I'd say, 3 or 4 weeks ago. So some of you may have bought it already. Others may be on the fence. Still others might have tuned in simply because you'd like to hear this webinar. So whatever the reason, I'm very, very glad that you're here. And I'm glad that you've taken time out of your, what I'm sure is a very busy day, to hear me talk for an hour. So you better like the sound of my voice, and I'll really try to make it worth your while. So the topic of this webinar today is going to be the art of piece placement. And as you might guess, this constitutes one of the chapters, one of the many chapters of the Naroditsky method. And in particular, the method is, the video is subdivided into various sections. So there's a section on opening, there's a section on the middle game, and as you can probably guess, the art of piece placement is in the middle game positional chess subsection. So it's one of my favorite, absolute favorite topics in positional chess. And to me, piece placement really forms the backbone of positional mastery in every single sense. And no matter what your level is, you need to know how to place your pieces. So this is really what we're going to be talking about today. And I'm going to be sharing some of my wisdom and some of my advice regarding piece placement. And I think we'll just have a lot of fun. Now, before we jump into our first example, a little bit of nitty-gritty before we kind of really start. In terms of interaction, what I'm seeing, and I'm, I'll tell you right now so there's no misunderstanding, I'm going to be presenting my chessboard on ChessBase soon enough, and I have a little window where I see the chat. And which means that I will see whatever it is that you, the viewers, are writing me. But since I have a certain agenda and I'm trying to present my analysis, it's a little bit difficult to toggle between the two. So what I'm going to be doing, and what I encourage you to do, is that if you have specific questions regarding the analysis as I'm showing it, whether it's a certain move that you didn't understand, or I might be doing something entirely wrong, or I've just blundered my queen. If it's any of those things and it's an immediate question about the game that we're looking at or about the concept I've just described, you can go ahead and write the question in the chat, and there are no guarantees, but I'll try my best to answer as many questions as I can in the course of the game without disrupting the flow of the video. Number two, if you have more general questions about the video, series, or about chess in general, or about kind of more global concepts that I'll be talking about, I'll be giving you the opportunity to ask questions, in between games, and then we'll have a little bit of a bonus section at the end of the webinar where those who would like to stay a little bit longer will have a chance to ask me more general questions about chess, or about the video series, or about basketball, or whatever it is that you want to ask me about. I'm not an expert in a lot of fields, though, so mostly I'll take questions about chess. But that will be the general structure. I'll be showing games. I'll be responding to as many queries and specific questions as I can. If I don't get around to your question the first time, it's not because I have some personal vendetta against you. It's just because I'm looking at the board and I'm trying to focus. So no guarantees, but I will try my absolute best. Are there any kind of questions before I begin from any of the viewers about what we're going to be doing, or about the structure of this webinar? I'm going to wait 10 or 15 seconds for any viewers who might have questions to write them in the chat. All right, looks like everybody's on board with everything. So I am going to switch away from the camera view. I think you've had just about enough of my face, and we're actually going to do some chess, surprisingly. All right, very good. Once again, I would like to have a small assurance that you are seeing the chessboard on the screen. So I will call up the chat window once again. And let's see here. Just give me a moment. Perfect. This looks good. OK, so what I'd like to know is if you see my chessboard looks fine. Very, very good. Nice, nice. So let's begin. The first game that I'm going to be showing you today is a game that I have very fond memories of. And it's a game that I show in the video. And what is this game? Well, this is a game that I played in the Philadelphia Open 2013. And I had the white pieces in this position. And I was playing a very talented junior from Canada, I believe. And he was rated about 2,000, and I was rated 2470 or so. So I was an IM at the time. And after the opening, we reached the position that is in front of you. And very often in these, when I watch video series myself by other players, or I'm reading chess books and I see a chess position, what I like to do is to get kind of a big picture understanding of what's going on. So before we start considering chess moves and before we start analyzing, let's try to understand what's going on. And this is what I'll be doing when I show you a position, because I played this game and I've analyzed this many times, but I realize that many of you are seeing this position for the first time. So I'll explain a little bit, and then maybe I'll give you, the viewers, a chance to find some of the juicy moves. Okay, so it's white to move here, and what came to my mind when I was playing the game is that things are not going quite as well as I would like them to. Why not? Well, there are a few factors at play here. The first thing is that black has a very impressive central pawn structure. So you can see all of these pawns are very far advanced. And on the other hand, my own pawn structure is a little bit damaged. I've got these doubled pawns on d5 and d3. And connected to that is the fact that black has a very well-placed knight on g4. And not only is this knight exerting pressure on the king side, in some perhaps not so distant future, the knight may return with very great power back to f6, whereby this pawn, let me put the arrow again, whereby this pawn on d5 will be subjected to some very serious pressure. So to some, there are certainly certain things about this position that I didn't like. And furthermore, perhaps most importantly, I was not very satisfied with the way that my pieces were placed. And the bishop is on c2. It's not doing anything in particular. The knight on f3, there seems to be this general kind of sleepiness, lethargy about white's position that I really didn't like. So to some, I wasn't very happy here. And how I'll start my exploration of piece placement is by saying that very often when things just generally aren't going very well, and you seem to be getting outplayed, quite frequently the reason can be traced back to the fact that your pieces are not placed as well as they should be. And when I grew up with a Russian kind of chess background. I was born in America. Don't get me wrong, but I've had Russian coaches most of my life, and the Russian school of chess, if such a thing can even be said to exist, places a very high emphasis on the importance of knowing where to place your pieces. And when I was growing up, my coaches would very often help me prepare for a certain opponent. They would say either, "Oh, this guy or this player knows how to place their pieces well," or "he's not very good at placing his pieces." So in the Russian kind of chess tradition, there's a very high emphasis placed on knowing where to place your pieces. And in this case, in order to get out of these doldrums, in order to get out of this very shaky position, it's quite clear that White has to introduce some kind of dynamism into the position. And this can be done, of course, by somehow improving the placement or improving the coordination of his pieces. And the logical follow-up is, well, how can this be achieved? So I will take some ideas, some preliminary ideas from the viewers. What do you think White should do in this position? And don't be shy. We're in this together, and the great thing about chess is that when you're training, you can make 100 mistakes, and you can still learn a lot. So let's see some ideas thrown out there. D4. We've got D4, we've got B4, and we've got H3 and G4. Okay, perfect. So, and another viewer goes for B4. So these are all the candidate moves that we need. We have D4. This is exactly the same lines that I was thinking along, B4, and we've got H3. Okay, we've got really 3 approaches, and all of them are either trying to, somehow, I don't know, make the position more dynamic, like B4, or H3 pushing the knight away from G4, or D4 trying to open up the center. So let's go through these moves one by one. D4 is what really occurred to me first. And the idea, of course, is that you're opening up this diagonal for the bishop, and that's, well, logical enough. And if you can somehow get this pawn away from F5, then things might be turned for the better. The issue with this is that Black can simply take and play E4, and he's not only has he locked up the bishop, which now tragically stares at this pawn's ugly face. But more importantly, this pawn on D5 and the pawn on D4, they're even more weak than they were. And Black's pawn phalanx on the king side has gotten even more impressive. So this is definitely a good try, but it's not something that I was particularly fond of. Point 2, H3 is another thing that I was considering. And the issue with the move G4 is, as one viewer suggested, and this is a very interesting idea, don't get me wrong here. And by the way, just so you know, in terms of the chat, I'm going to be analyzing a little bit, and then I'm going to be switching back to the chat window, looking at what people are saying, responding to it a little bit, then going back. So I'm not going to be constantly monitoring the chat. So bear with me if you're asking a question and I'm not getting to it immediately. I will get to it. H3 and G4 is a little bit problematic because Black's just going to take twice. And true, you've opened up the king side a little bit, but this F-file is going to cost White a lot. I'm going to put a queen on F6, too much activity for Black. Doesn't quite work. The third idea that I had is to play H3, and maybe I should play knight H4, trying to improve the position of the knight. And I'll take this opportunity to introduce one of the fundamental concepts of piece placement. So pay attention closely here. I know I'm talking a lot, and we want to look at chess moves, but bear with me here. I think one of the mistakes that players often make is that they look at the activity of one piece and they assume that if they're somehow able to improve the placement of one piece, then their position will magically improve. And it's the same kind of, the analogy that I'd like to make here is that if you have some sort of illness, and an illness that requires taking pills, taking a pill won't cure the illness. It'll target the symptoms for a day or two maybe, but you'll need to keep taking pills, and eventually you'll need to go for some kind of operation or treatment. That's a bit of a morbid analogy. I have a tendency to make very off-kilter, weird analogies, and I'm sure you'll realize that soon enough. But I think you get the point. Black can simply play queen d7, and you can plan a knight on g6. Woohoo, congratulations, your knight looks really nice. What is it actually doing there? Nothing. And eventually you'll have to get back to h4. Either immediately or Black will simply push the knight away. You'll probably end up losing the d5 pawn, and things will be even worse. So another analogy you might consider is you need to control some kind of sea. I don't know why dams are built, but you need to control the flow of a certain body of water, and you build a very weak dam. So it might hold up for a few days, but once the water collapses it, it's going to flow with even more vengeance. So this is a very enduring and a very common mistake with piece placement. You need to think of your pieces as one unit, not as this kind of individual members. When you activate all of your pieces and they're working together, that's what tends to make a lasting impact, not these one-move threats that can be easily parried. I hope that makes sense. Okay, so finally we get to a better direction, and I see a few viewers have suggested this already. We start with the move b4, and that is indeed what I played in the game. Well, black really obviously has to take, otherwise I'll take on c5, and then I'll follow up with b4, or d4. Takes, knight b7. Point one, we've gotten the knight onto a very awkward square on b7. As you can see, it doesn't have very many prospects because this pawn on b4 is controlling both of the knight's possible squares. And knight can go to d8, of course, but it'll take him a while before the knight really reaches any meaningful square. And I know this national master from the Bay Area where I live. His name is Dana McKenzie. He writes a very, very fascinating blog on chess and mathematics. Very interesting person. I highly recommend reading his blog and reading his writings. His name is Dana McKenzie, in case you would like to write that down or search for it. And he really helped me develop some of my ideas when I was writing my book, Mastering Positional Chess. And one of his ideas is called moving your opponent's pieces. Let that sink in for a moment. Moving your opponent's pieces. What does it mean to move your opponent's pieces? Well, it means making moves that not only help you improve the placement of your own pieces, but making moves that also in some way force your opponent to place his pieces or her pieces on less desirable squares. And this is what white is doing here. Not only is he carving out, as we'll see, a path for one of his pieces to paradise, but in addition to this, you're forcing the knight to you're kind of giving him a demotion. You're demoting him from a5, which is more or less a decent square, to b7, whereby he has zero prospects whatsoever. And as some of you have, as I see already pointed out, you see the general idea that I'm getting at here, and then let me just check. Yeah, so very good point by Mr. Malik Kuraya. We notice the idea of b4 is now this knight on f3 has a very, very nice path to either e6 or c6. And that is a better start because then we're putting that pawn on d5 to good use. But we have to be very careful in chess. When we see a tempting idea, you can't grab that piece and just put it on the square. You have to verify that everything is checking out tactically. And if you play knight d4, as some of you have pointed out, this would have allowed queen h4 and you can basically resign. Okay, because now I'm threatening the knight and I'm threatening these two pawns. And a triple attack is even worse than a double attack. So this would result in tears and gnashing of teeth, and that would not be good. So what does white have to start with? Somebody I know many of you pointed out. Which move does white have to start with preliminarily before he plays knight d4? Let's see it. I know you know. Let's see that move. I know some of you, h3, very good, Saraswat, h3. This is the kind of finer element of positional mastery. You see an idea and then you refine it to the point where it passes tactical tests, okay? h3, the knight is pushed back to f6, and only now do we play the move knight d4. And this is very important because now, here's the thing. Not only does the knight now get to either e6 or potentially c6 or even f5 if black gives up the pawn, but in addition to this, and this hints at a concept that I'll talk about for the next game that I'll kind of flesh out in more detail. But right now you can think of it this way. Not only do you activate the knight, but you also give other pieces more potential, right? Because now white's rook can get onto c1, something that would not have been possible with the c file blocked. In addition, the bishop can get onto b3, where it will do the very important job of supporting the pawn on d5. And I'm really into green today. I'm making all these green arrows. The hidden reason is I don't remember the keys to make them red or yellow, which is possible in ChessSpace as well. And I'm afraid of pressing a certain button that will like close everything and then end the webinar all of a sudden. I've done that before. There's like this shortcut. It's like Control Alt F4 that closes a certain screen. I don't want to get into any of that, so I'm going to stick with what I know. And if you're tired of green, then I'm sorry. But not only does he activate the knight, he also opens up more potential for his other pieces. And we'll talk about this more in the next game after we finish analyzing this one. Now, tactically, it really is quite obvious that knight takes d5 is impossible on account of bishop b3, and the bishop skewers the knight, and black goes queen f7. And can somebody suggest a follow-up here? You can basically win in one move. Let's see. Think about how you can make the pin a little bit more, add a little bit of mustard to that pin. Looking for any kind of suggestions here. Very, very simple. You know, don't try to overcomplicate things. Manas, yeah, queen f3, very good. Queen f3, as some of you have pointed out, simply wins the game on the spot. Okay, because he takes d4, bishop takes d5, and it's a pin. And if the king moves away, then not only do I take one knight, then I simply pick up the other one. And notice this knight on b7. It's almost like magic. You push the knight on b7, and then after all of these transformations, it so turns out that it was just perfect that we got the knight to go onto b7. Remember, moving your opponent's pieces. Had the knight been on a5, well, black would have been able to capture on b3. So it all kind of fits together. Now, knight takes d5 is impossible. So in the game, black played the move queen d7, defending the pawn, and now simply knight e6, reaping the fruits of what I was just doing here. Now the knight implants itself on the best possible square. So the position has been opened up. We've really achieved most of our aims, but now is not the time to rest on laurels, okay? And I can switch back to the notation window because I'm not going to ask you to find any more moves here. I'm just going to explain. One more common pitfall that I see some players falling into is that it's related to what I just mentioned. They'll activate mobilize one piece, put it on a good square, and then they'll kind of say, okay, now we can relax and play a generic move like a4 or queen d2. Well, as I mentioned, your pieces are one unit. So once you've put one piece on an optimal square and you've crippled your opponent's position somewhat, that is very often a sign that you can really pounce and you can exploit the initiative that you're currently having. The initiative is another chapter of the Naroditsky method, but kind of the short of it is that once you see the tide turning in your favor, you really need to put the foot on the gas pedal. And here I did so with a move queen f3, which is not too difficult to find. And as you can tell, I made the effort to mobilize one piece, and now I can reap the fruits of my efforts. All of the other moves come very easily, and black is already in very serious trouble here. Now, as before, knight takes d5 fails for, I would think, a variety of reasons. Let's see. I think one line that I saw during the game, if I'm not mistaken, is queen takes d5, rook takes e6, and can somebody suggest a very pretty way to exploit this pin? There's a way that will make black cry and then resign. Let's see if anybody sees it. Come on, folks. Bishop. I assume this means bishop b3. Yeah, bishop b3 is fine. Queen takes e6 and rook. Rook takes e5 is what I'm looking for. Now, very careful, very careful. Queen takes e6 and bishop b3 allows d5, and when you get the sinking feeling here, that is not good. You know, when you blunder and you feel or you feel like terrible, like the world's about to end. So what I have to say about this does not have to do with piece placement directly, but if you can win simply, don't overcomplicate things. Okay, Occam's razor. If you can. You're not playing to win the brilliancy prize, you're playing to win a point. So rook takes c5 is the simplest. D takes c5 loses the queen. Black has to play rook e8, and now you can simply play bishop b3, and you're going to win the rook. So the game is basically over here, okay? So knight takes d5 is not possible, and my opponent played the move knight d8. Intending to trade knights. And here, again, the move comes very easy, bishop b3. And this is the great thing about having all of your pieces active. When one piece sacrifices itself for the greater good, it is replaced by an even stronger piece. So in this case, if knight takes e6, then white's knight is gone. But because I've made this effort to mobilize all of my pieces, everything else takes its place. Queen takes f5, winning a pawn, and this pawn on e6 is like a bone in black's throat. Black can basically resign. So this would not have been very adequate, and the game is basically almost over. Black played rook a7, somehow trying to keep the back rank or keep the 7th rank defended, but of course things are really looking low. So queen takes f5, reaping kind of the concrete fruits of my labor, winning a pawn. The knight is still on e6, and here my opponent kind of collapsed. He played the move king h8, which basically loses on the spot. As I pointed out here in my annotations, and I'm not sure if you folks are seeing the notation window. Just so I know for future reference, can you see only the board, or can you also see the notation? So somebody please let me know. Do you see the screen with the moves? Let's see. Just so I know whether to we can see both. Okay, fine. Seeing the notation as well. Okay, fine. So I won't ask you to find any more moves here, but as I point out here in my annotations, a4 is a crushing move as well. A takes b5, rook a3, and black could have stayed alive for a little bit longer, but as you can probably tell, the position is very, very nasty. I can probably take and go bishop c4 or something. Still up a pawn, still with this very powerful knight on e6. So bottom line is black played the move king h8. And you can see that I played the move rook ac1. But a small tip for you, when you're reading a book, a chess book, or you're watching a video or something like that, and you see all of the moves in front of you, right? It's very tempting to nod your head and kind of say, yeah, I get it. I get why a certain move was played. And this is not only in chess. You know, I have this problem with studying for exams. I took a computer science class last quarter, and very often when you're studying for CS or computer science exams, you get all these practice problems, right? And I do a practice problem for like a few seconds, kind of see the general solution and say, okay. Then I check the solution and I wouldn't look twice. I'd say, yeah, I totally get it. This makes perfect sense. And then of course, at 8 o'clock in the morning, we get the exam in front of us, and I have no idea how to do any of the problems because I didn't put in enough effort understanding them when I had the solutions in front of me. So the bottom line here is you're following this general principle. There is no such thing as sufficiently active pieces. You always need to be on the lookout for ways in which you can improve your pieces. And I'll tackle this in more depth in the next game. The bottom line here is rook ac1 is a very strong move because it brings in kind of the last reserve into play. And a very good byproduct of this, as my opponent was graceful or was generous enough to show me, is that he finally lost his patience and took on d5. Again, as I point out, I have this line in my annotations, queen e7, f4 would have been equally crushing, as you can probably tell. So he took on b5, bishop takes, and the golden rule, you know, the knight on e6 has done its job. It's received its medal of honor or whatever. It's gone on to greater things, greener pastures, and black loses his rook. So this is the great thing about having all of your pieces active. You get, you know, tactics are not generated randomly, and I want you to understand this. Tactics are generated very often because your pieces are so active. Certain ideas that might seem coincidental are in fact not coincidental at all. They're just the product of your active pieces. The fact that you have optimally placed pieces engenders kind of causes tactical opportunities to arise on the board. And this is a very important understanding to have. So the game is over, black loses an exchange, and to quickly, for the sake of completeness, this is how the game ended. Queen e4, rook f7, d4, another shot after knight takes d4. Obviously, queen takes d4 wins the knight. And black played a few more moves. And here I just couldn't resist. I had to do something funny, f4. You know, I played d4 on one side, and now, for the sake of symmetry, playing f4 on the other side. And the last little story I'll tell here, black played knight e6, rook takes e5, and resigned. But something actually very funny happened during the game. I played this move f4, right? And I'm enjoying myself. And all of a sudden, I ask myself, wait a minute, what if black takes on f4 with the rook? And my intention, of course, was to take back, and I thought I'd win the second rook. But then I saw that black has a very, very tricky tactical resource here. It doesn't quite work out. But can somebody tell me what caused me like a mini heart attack here? Can somebody Hi, I'm back. This was not intended as the heart attack prank by any means. I was switching back to the chat window, and then I closed my internet window by total accident. So one moment to resume here. Okay, let's see. There we go. So you should be now seeing the board window once again. And I'll call back the chat. So one moment, please. So basically, yeah, this turned out to be kind of a meta prank, but it was not intentional by any means, or in any way, shape, or form. So give me one moment, please, while I call back the chat window. This turned out to be kind of a meta prank, and it was not intentional. Yeah, I can hear myself. Okay, let's see here. Show chat. Okay. Yeah, I'm known to be particularly clumsy with respect to any kind of technology. So you should be seeing the board once again. Great. Queen takes f4. So once again, can somebody tell me what was I afraid of all of a sudden when the screen turned to black? Knight takes h3, then queen g6. Very good, Long Hua. Knight takes h3 is indeed what suddenly caused me a lot of grief, because I saw g takes h3, queen g6 check, and I thought, holy crap, I'm losing the queen, because this is a very common tactic. When you've got a skewer, just a very small moment of advice, when you've got a skewer, be very careful about ways that your opponent can exit the skewer with check, and this is exactly what happens here. But fortunately, I was so relieved when I saw the move queen g4. Big, big, big breath, and white retains his 2 rooks, and he's still up a queen. So all's well that ends well, as they say. But this was a very big moment of fear. Anyways, that is how the game ended. In the game, black simply played knight e6, rook takes c5, and resigned. Okay, so it's good after we finish a game to kind of summarize it briefly, and then we'll transition to kind of the body of this webinar, where I will really go in depth into piece placement and talk about more specific ways in which you can understand piece placement and actionable advice that you can apply in your game. So once again, I'll make it so that you can see my face. So hopefully you can see me now. The first thing I'll first order of business. Are there any questions that anybody has with regards to either the game that we just saw, or anything else that I've just mentioned about piece placement? So I'll give you folks about 30 seconds or so. I'll give you folks about 30 seconds or so to come up with questions, and then I'll switch back to the chat. Okay, is e6 better place? Where can we get the whole annotated game? So let's go back to the game then. Okay, I'll give you about 30 more seconds if anybody has any questions. Okay, we're getting a few questions. All right, let's draw the line here. Any last questions? How did black go down so quickly from what seemed like a distant great question there? Okay, so let's start answering the questions. First question, I'm saying, screen is black. Yeah, well, that was deliberate. Hopefully you should be seeing the board now again. Any way to actually preview part of the course? Okay, so let's go from the beginning. In terms of the technology, my apologies. I'm a novice at this, so I learn from mistakes and from doing. Can you provide, Casey Jones asks, can you provide the notations for the games covered in the webinar? Well, what I'll say is that if you get the actual video, then it comes with all of the games included and all of the game notation. This particular game, if you search the position, I think it's probably online or it's on ChessBase. Ron Birnbaum, what rating level is your video meant for? Generally speaking, I'll answer video questions at the end. So if you have questions about the video, I will give you plenty of opportunity to ask those questions. But for now, I'll just mention it's very broad ranging. So anything from a little bit past beginner to very advanced master, or even grandmaster level. That is, I intended it specifically for a wide range of audience. Jai Prakash Singh asks, and I'll take maybe two or three questions before we move on to the next game. Is e6 a better place for white knight than e5 in general? Well, I would hesitate to make such generalizations, and I guess you're taking your inspiration in the game from the fact that black's knight is somehow on e6, or white's knight was on e6 before, and is it better than the knight being on e5? And you should stray away from such generalizations as a rule, because they can be a little bit damaging, and in general, everything depends on the position. Okay, sometimes knight is better on e5, sometimes it's better on e6. It all depends on the position at hand. Where can we get the whole edited game? Well, I answered that question already. Target audience, chess tips. I'll answer two more questions. Chess tips. How did black go down so quickly from what seemed like a decent position? Well, in reality, the truth of the matter is that I was a little bit misleading you. The position, in fact, the starting position is already much better for white, contingent upon him finding the moves b4 and knight d4. So if I didn't find b4 knight d4, then black would have been fine or even better. But after I found this entire sequence, which is 100% forced, as I mentioned, black could have defended a little bit more resiliently at this stage. He could have gone a5, but as generally speaking, black's position was already quite bad. Again, provided that I found the sequence starting with b4 and ending with knight d4, knight e6, followed by all that good stuff, okay, with queen f3. Okay. All right. So I think that covers it for the specific game questions. So let's now move on to the next game. And the next 20 minutes or so, we will really get into the meat. And this is, if you want to get kind of a preview of the things I talk about in the video series itself, then this is what you really need to pay attention for, because I really try to go past that superficial layer, the introductory layer, and I try to really provide kind of actionable advice that you can immediately apply to your games, that you can use to structure your training in a better way. So let's go on, and I'd like to have training mode on here because so let's go to the pertinent moment. This is a game that I actually did not show in the video series, and I will end this webinar by giving you a little bit of a sneak preview about my favorite game that I included in this chapter, and I'll let you find the move using the knowledge you've acquired. So let's go to the pertinent moment. The game kind of started out rather innocuously. This is a game between two Hungarian grandmasters. It was an English defense, very kind of crazy positional play. Eventually, white started out playing black. So we're going to skip to the important part. There's a lot of maneuvering here and a lot of things to unpack, but that's not kind of the important part. The important part comes right here. This position is absolutely critical. And this is the position that you should let your eyes adjust to, kind of. Okay, so before we delve into the position at hand, let me introduce to you a concept that I consider to be kind of central for understanding piece placement in general. Okay, and I hope that, let's see. You should be seeing the board. Please let me know once again that you are seeing the board. No board? Still no board? Let's see. There we go. You should be seeing the board now. Great. Okay. So let your eyes adjust to the position a little bit while I talk about the concept that to me is kind of central to piece placement. And I'll say this in terms of an analogy that I kind of thought of recently. It's not something that I've had in mind for like forever or anything like that. But the concept is thinking of piece placement in terms of kinetic versus potential energy. Okay? And by the way, in this position, if you'd like to start thinking about the position already, I would encourage you to listen to what I have to say, but it's white to move here. So Kinetic versus potential energy. Now, what the hell does that mean in general, and what does that mean when applied to piece placement? So don't get me wrong, when I make analogies to other disciplines or fields, I'm not trying to showboat, my knowledge or anything like that. I actually don't know anything about physics, or I don't know a lot. I took physics in 11th grade, that was it. But I think it can be very valuable to think of chess concepts that are complicated or that are hard to understand sometimes in terms of other related concepts in other fields, and that might help clarify matters. So just like any analogy, I think it's a good idea. And I see that you're suggesting moves, but bear with me for 2 or 3 minutes. This is a very important idea that I'd like to outline here. What is kinetic and potential energy in real life? Well, I'll give them 1 minute explanation. I'm sure some of you know. Kinetic energy is energy caused by movement. That's the word kinetic means movement related. So when I'm walking from one corner of the room to the other, I'm generating kinetic energy, and that should make intuitive sense to you. You're generating energy by running on a treadmill, for example. Energy by movement, and the common relation that physics teachers make is imagine a roller coaster. When it's descending downhill, it's generating kinetic energy. Now, there's a second type of energy that can be a little bit harder to grasp called potential energy. It's kind of the counterpart of kinetic energy. They're mutually exclusive. Potential energy is energy that can be transformed into kinetic energy. So the easiest way to think about this is to imagine a roller coaster at the top of a hill. It's not moving, it's at the top of a hill, okay? And it's about to descend full speed down that passage. That roller coaster has potential energy because it has the potential to transform into kinetic energy, okay? Anyhow, how does this relate to piece placement? And I know you're burning to actually analyze this position. Why do I talk for 15 minutes about nothing? Well, I think you'll appreciate it in the end. I think sometimes a piece, sometimes we have the temptation to think of a piece in terms of kinetic energy. How good does the piece look? How active does it seem? But it's much less easy to appreciate pieces in terms of how much potential do they have, and how can I put them on squares that might not look so pretty, but that have the maximum amount of potential, okay? And let this concept sink in, and this is what we will really unpack in this game, and that I unpack in the chapter as a whole. Just because a piece looks pretty doesn't necessarily mean that it's well placed. And in fact, pieces that are placed, in the bottom of your position, they aren't necessarily more passive than pieces that are right next to your opponent's king. In any case, as many of you have already suggested, in the position in front of you, white's pieces have a lot of potential energy at the moment. The queen is very active, the knight is very active, the rook is very active, and the bishop is very active. So white's pieces are perfectly coordinated. He is better. And the key to understanding piece placement is to have this correct interaction between kinetic energy and potential energy. When you have a lot of kinetic energy in your pieces, that means it might be time to regroup some of those pieces in a way that they generate more potential energy. If your pieces have a lot of potential energy, like in this case, it's probably a sign that there is some kind of tactical shot, some kind of way to transform that potential energy into kinetic energy. And as many of you have pointed out, you're absolutely correct. Knight g6, double exclam, is the best move. Quite a simple tactic, really, because you're threatening knight e7 check. And now you can probably tell that the knight has a lot of kinetic energy. It's descending down the roller coaster, threatening knight e7, wreaking havoc upon black's pieces. Black's choice here is very limited. F takes g6 is, well, impossible for quite obvious reasons. He can move his king to prevent the fork, but that would allow, well, he can start with knight e7, but queen takes f7 perhaps is even stronger, just winning a pawn and soon enough the game. So as you'll probably understand, black's choice is really limited to the move bishop e6, okay, cutting off the knight. Now, if the queen moves away, then black's going to take the knight. He's going to be fine. But continuing to transform that potential energy into kinetic energy, we, of course, take on e6. Back. And this is really the critical moment of the game. And it's the moment that I'd really like you to, close the phone, close all of your distractions, and really zero in on the position. The first thing that comes to our mind naturally is the move queen takes e6. Okay, queen takes e6 check. And you can probably tell by the annotation here that it's a question. There's a question mark attached to it. It's actually a mistake. And this is the key here. What came to my mind when I was looking at this game, and the game continuation was actually queen takes e6 check, king h7. Now, Balag, the grandmaster playing with white, played the move bishop h3. The justification, of course, is that after king takes g6, it's checkmate in 3 moves. Can somebody tell me how white checkmates black here? What is the checkmate? Come on, let's see it. Let's see. I know you guys see it. There are actually 2 ways to mate in 3 that I see. Can somebody say bishop f5, queen e2? The dark crazy cyborg. Very good. Bishop f5 and queen e2 is one way, or queen f7 is the other way, and it's checkmate. Okay, so this looks very good and well. So of course, like I play rook c7. You play the move bishop f5, and it looks completely winning. It looks like you're mating. Okay, and this is the key to understanding piece placement. White's pieces now have a lot of kinetic energy. Think about it. But they don't have a lot of potential energy. Why is that? Because if you look a little bit deeper at the position, if you go beyond appearances, and yes, it looks like white is mating, but how a grandmaster would approach this position is ask himself, okay, white's pieces have a lot of kinetic energy. They're very well placed, or at least they appear to be. But what are the actual threats? And if you look at a move like queen takes d4, you might realize all of a sudden that in terms of real threats, white comes up completely empty. There are literally there's no way to generate any kind of attack, much less a mating attack. And this, to me, is an amazing idea. And it's an idea that's very important to grasp. Just because pieces look good doesn't necessarily imply that they're coordinated in any meaningful way. Okay, and take a few moments here to understand what's going on. Are there any questions about this position? Or what I just said, or do you think you see a checkmate here? I want to give 30 seconds of silence here to appreciate the amazingness of what's going on in this position. One anonymous person says, I like that mentality. Sometimes it's better to appreciate a position in silence. To me, this represents the essence of positional chess in general. It's not falling for appearances, but going a little bit deeper into the position. And this happened in the game. White eventually won the game, but suffice it to say this position is equal. And the best thing to do would have been to repeat moves with knight f8 and knight g6. White in the game played something like bishop c2, and he played knight f8, or he repeated once, he went to e5, he went to c2. Of course, if he goes to f7, black's simply going to capture, and he's going to be totally fine. He might even play, I don't know, queen d5 or queen d6 or something like that. And if white might be slightly better, but the show goes on, as they say, the game goes on. And instead of this, if you had thought of the position in terms of potential energy rather than kinetic energy, you might have been able to find the correct move in this position. So queen takes e6 generates a lot of kinetic energy. But can you find a move that perhaps doesn't look as impressive, but is in actuality much, much stronger? And if you can find this move, I'll be very impressed. So think about it very closely here, and try to figure out the move. I'm getting a lot of I see in the chat with some delay knight e7. So let me make sure in the previous line. Remember this position and try to think. But very quickly, let's return to the position we just analyzed. I guess if knight e7, then simply king h8. There's no way to continue. Okay, so just to make it clear. So keep thinking in this position, and let me see some suggestions. Bishop h3. I see 2 bishop h3. Anybody else would like to suggest bishop h3 or any other ideas? Okay, a lot of bishop h3s. Excellent. Bishop h3 is indeed the absolutely correct way to approach this position. And the point here is that the threat of bishop takes c6 check doesn't look that strong. But think about the potential energy of white's pieces. If black ever plays the move king h7, you will always be able to respond with queen c2, and you've developed this absolutely devastating pin. And then your bishop is going to land on e6, and now the king is actually trapped because you have so many discovered checks, and the threats are so much stronger than with the queen, with the pieces rearranged with the queen on f5. So now the queen is kind of the hero in the backwoods on c2, watching the attack from afar and letting the minor pieces do the busy work. And this is, in fact, completely winning. So I think when I analyzed the position, I gave white can even start with bishop takes c6 because the knight is untouchable, rook c7, queen c2. And now the beautiful justification is that if queen takes d4, then you've got this really awesome checkmate. It's a mate in 3, so not particularly difficult to find, but this is a very nice tactical justification. So remember, I've already mentioned that if your pieces are active and they're working together in an optimal way, you're going to have opportunities to create tactics. So that's a very important thought. And black is completely lost here. He's totally paralyzed. So one line that I gave in my analysis was queen e8, knight f4, and if king goes to h8, you can simply finish black off with the move d5. And I hope it makes sense to you that black is entirely busted here. He's totally paralyzed. This pawn's going to go to d6, and eventually you're going to develop some kind of devastating mating attack, or queen h7, or the pawn's going to promote. So one of many things that are very tragic for black are going to happen in this position. And that would have been the way to win the game. But bishop h3 is so hard to find because we are so tempted by the move queen takes c6 check and by the opportunity to lend our pieces all of this kinetic energy, which seems to be winning, but which is in fact not. So this is, I think, perhaps the most important thing you should take out of this webinar. And I'm deliberately touching on slightly different topics than I do in the video series, the chapter itself, whereby I talk about this and several other very important tips and ideas. But I hope that you're beginning to get a general understanding of my approach toward piece placement, and certain things that might seem very complicated at the beginning are becoming a little bit clearer. So we won't look at the whole game here. White, as you know, took on e6, but the key here is to find the move bishop h3. All right. So first of all, first order of business, any questions about the actual moves in this game? Do you guys all understand why bishop h3 is winning and the whole concept of kinetic potential energy? I'll wait for a few moments to see if anybody has any burning questions about the game. And after that, since we're reaching the end of the webinar, we'll conduct kind of a general Q&A and a general discussion on the video series and on piece placement, positional chess. So Chess Tips asks, so during our game, how would we find bishop h3? I love that question. Can you show that mate again? I will show the beautiful mate as first, and then I'll describe how would you actually go about finding bishop h3 in a game, especially because the grandmaster didn't find bishop h3. So what the hell am I talking about? Find bishop h3 when GM didn't. I really like to be the armchair general and say all of this advice, and then my own games I don't do anything. So I'll try to take a crack at explaining. So the mate that one viewer is requesting to see once again arised after bishop h3, and then you can start with bishop takes c6, queen c2. Now you're threatening this beautiful checkmate that could have arisen after queen takes d4, check, queen h7 check, forcing the knight onto the square. And now knight returns to g6, delivering this absolutely beautiful checkmate. Okay, so this is a threat that you should see if you kind of train your tactics frequently. Now, to answer the second query, how would you find bishop h3 in a real game? Well, hopefully after you understand this concept of kinetic energy, you'll see the move queen takes c6 check, but instead of just executing it on the board automatically like a robot, you will say, wait a moment, remember in this webinar or in the video series, Daniel was talking about kinetic potential energy and understanding whether pieces are actually active or whether they simply look active. And the whole concept of moving your opponent's pieces. And hopefully, once you start calculating and going a little bit deeper into this variation, you might even see that after bishop f5, queen takes c4, you might not be fooled by the appearance of the pieces, but in reality, you might see, wait a minute, my pieces are active. Yes, they are, but do they actually have squares onto which they can penetrate, which is really the indicator of true piece activity. It's not how many squares a piece looks at or controls. It's how many meaningful squares a piece can go onto. Okay, and you might see here that it's really not that much. And you might also see that after the move bishop h3, while the kinetic energy is not yet caught up, the potential energy here is so much more valuable because you're cornering the king, and here you're actually going to develop a mating attack. Okay, so that's my kind of 2 cents. Somebody asked which opening. I skipped through the start of the game. So the opening, I think, was in English, a very crazy maneuvering game as I described. Okay, so I know that this seemed very rushed, and there's so many things to talk about. And in general, I really like talking about chess, and I really like describing thought processes. So another question: what opening did the game arise? Let me go back to the notation screen so you folks can see it. It was indeed an English defense. So it was an English defense, and it was a complicated maneuvering battle. And eventually, through many, many piece moves and many deep ideas, here h6 was a mistake, as you can probably tell, because it allowed knight g6. My guess is Vaida, who is playing black, very strong grandmaster, 2600, but he missed the move knight g6, and he missed this entire idea with bishop h3. But all of this comes to show how incredibly complex all of these topics are. I mean, what missed bishop h3? So in any case, since we're reaching the end of our time together, I would like to now I'm going to put the chat window kind of in the center of the screen. I'm going to share my beautiful face again, or not so beautiful, depending on, what you think, but that's a different topic entirely. And I'm going to open the floor up for any kind of questions regarding specifics or generalities or the video series. So basically how this is going to work, type your questions in the chat. I'll get to them one by one, and please be patient because I'm going to try to be fairly thorough. Okay, so let me just share the camera angle again, and you're going to have to let me know whether you can see me in just a moment, because once again, this is my first time doing a webinar, so I'm working out all the technological issues along with you. So I've just shared my camera angle. Let me know if you can see me. And for the moment, I will start to answer the questions. So first question from Mr. Red Agstreet. Oh, I already answered. From which opening? This was an English defense, this game. Great, you can see me, perfect. Second question, how to calculate kinetic and potential energies of pieces in a position? Any formula, asks Mr. Jayaprakash Singh. Great question. Okay, and one side note, folks, if you ask your own question, don't just kind of wait until I get to it. Try to engage in my answers of other questions as well, because that's how we learn, okay? Because if one person asks a question, it's the rule of classrooms, right? I have this where I'm sitting in a lecture hall and I'm really shy about asking a question because I think it's a stupid question. But no such thing. If you have a question, chances are many other people do too. So getting back to the question, how do you actually assess kinetic and potential energy? Well, that's a great question. And there's no formula. It's not like there's, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus some kind of bishop times knight all over 2 times the quadratic square root of whatever, the knight placement. No such thing. Chess is not mathematics. But what you can do is you can ask yourself, visually speaking, if a piece looks very powerful, and if it's controlling a lot of squares, that's usually kinetic energy, okay? And kinetic energy is not bad. It's just that you need to realize how they interact. And in some positions, a piece that looks very active is actually not doing that much. And you need to reroute that piece in such a way that it has more potential energy than kinetic energy. And you need to manage those two things. Okay, next question. From Santosh J. In this game or in this position, perhaps, how many moves beyond should we actually consider to analyze to find these smart moves? As you can probably tell, not very many moves. If you see bishop h3 and you see this idea of queen c2, and even better if you see that mating idea with queen h7, and I might later on go back to the board again, then you should be able to have enough confidence to execute the move. So it's not really about deep calculation, okay? Jonathan Russell asks, what are the things we should be studying every day? Well, great question and hard one to answer because it depends on your level. And I think chess literature and a lot of instructional chess content is based a lot, there are a lot of chess players who think they know exactly what one should do, and they promise these systems that offer, you should do 30% tactics and 60% opening training and 5% positional chess. It's not, again, it's not math, and everyone has his or her own path toward chess mastery. But what I can say is that tactics are very important at any level. So no matter if you're a grandmaster, if you're 1300, or you're learning chess for 5 weeks, doing some form of tactics training almost every day, time permitting, is super important, because in that way you not only stay fresh, but that is how you improve your calculation, by really engaging with tactical puzzles. And there's a lot of good software, Chess Tempo, a lot of good software. I won't name too many names that allow you to solve problems, and books also, many different things. And the other thing you should be really focusing on is your weakness. And if you know that you struggle at something, don't skirt it aside. Eleanor Roosevelt's famous quote: "You must do the things you think you cannot do." Okay, I butchered it, but you must do the things or you don't want to do, or something like that. It's really true in chess, and you have to force yourself to rub salt in the wound sometimes. And if you're struggling at positional chess, then read books on positional chess. If you're struggling at endgames, read books on endgames. Analyze the endgames you've had. So the general approach you should be having to chess training is you do certain things consistently, like tactics. You might have super tournaments that you're following. You should be doing openings consistently. And I talk about all of this in the video, how to study. But you should also be having this more exclusive focus on things that you struggle with. Okay. I'll go for about another 10 minutes maybe, and then I'll start wrapping up. So I'll hopefully get to all of the questions by then. Let's go on. How do you know when it's safe? By the way, JJ, you do a great job. Thank you. I appreciate the compliments. I always appreciate compliments. And I appreciate criticism as well. So if you have any points that you'd like me to improve on, then by all means, shout it out. How do you know when it's safe to go down the exchange, like rook versus bishop in the last game, asks Mr. Gerson Floor. Well, here's the thing. The objective of chess is to checkmate your opponent's king. It's not to end up a certain amount of material ahead. And so some people assume or assign a kind of inherent value to material, and they think if you're down in exchange, then that's just bad. Well, it's not bad if you're mating your opponent's king, as you are here. So if you're confident enough in your compensation, and you're confident enough in your positional understanding, which is what I hope to help you with if you get my video series, among other things like calculation, then you'll begin to develop a better intuition for these gray area cases where you kind of get compensation, but do you really? If the more experienced you are and the better acquainted you are with various positional concepts, the easier it becomes to sacrifice material for long-term compensation. Next question. Baljit Singh asks, I'm solving a lot of tactics daily, but still unable to see the tactics during the game. What should I do? What is the correct way to progress in chess for 1600 rated player? Thanks. Well, I described chess training a little bit earlier. But what I'd say is that in terms of tactics, I think a lot of players solve a lot of tactics during the game or during training, but that they aren't as concentrated on certain tactical factors during the actual tournament game. So what I say is that you really need to be aware that just because you solve tactics won't mean you'll magically start seeing them during the game unless you're fully focused, okay? So I see a lot of questions, so let's see if I can find any ones that are unique. How many hours does GM, how many hours do I train per day? Well, since I'm in college and quite busy, I don't train as much. I maybe if I can get 30 minutes in of some tactics or something, I'm very happy. But I spend more time reading my psych textbook than doing tactics, unfortunately. But when I was taking my gap year and when I was in high school, I could train for 2-3 hours during a school day and maybe 5-6 hours easily over the weekend. So it's the whole 10,000 hour rule, if you've heard of it, it's very real. I mean, you need to put in a lot of time. There's no shortcut. Okay. And let's see. Is there a way to contact you if we have questions while we watch your video series? That's a great question. Okay, thank you, Fever Dog. In terms of contacting me, well, my Facebook page is not private instead. So you can send me a Facebook message. And that's probably the most reliable way. I check my Facebook messages, okay? And if you have a question about the video, then by all means, shoot me a message on Facebook. I'll reply, hopefully within a reasonable amount of time, okay? In terms of other ways of contacting me, you can contact me also through my website, danielnaroditsky.com or danielnaroditskychess.com. Both work. There's a contact me page. It sends me direct to my email. And that's another great way of contacting me. So either way works totally fine, okay? How much is your video series? That information is provided in the chat. Red Egg Street, let's get to some other questions first, and then if we have time at the end, I'll get back to your question. And we have about another 5 minutes before I'll start wrapping up. Okay. The Dark Side, Crazy Cyborg asks, I'm rated 2250 right now. I'm struggling with tactics. Can you suggest some good book? And also, what opening should I opt for, Grunfeld or Nimzo Indian? Also, which book should I get? Well, in terms of books on tactics, and I'm talking books, I could recommend Jacob Aagaard's books. He's written quite a few books on tactics. He's written a book called Excelling at Chess Calculation, and in general, he's a great chess author, and I really enjoy his books. And I'm sure you could also find many videos produced by iChess on many, like Empire Chess Series. And don't get me wrong here, I'm not trying to peddle products. I'm honestly, I think that if you watch videos, chess videos, in the right way, then you can really benefit a lot from them, because there's this level of interaction that you don't get with books. Now, if you watch a video and you your head is lolling back and you're on your phone at the same time and you're sending text messages, then, well, yes, you won't benefit. But if you're fully engaged and you're actually trying to find moves when the presenter is prompting you to, and you're writing down observations, then yes, I think you can absolutely benefit. So look at different chess videos on calculations and tactics. And also, I recommend Jacob Aagaard's books, okay? Okay, let's get to 2 or 3 more questions. John Kalan, I come from Croatia. A few weeks ago, I also bought your video lessons and enjoyed it very much. Thank you, John Kalan. I appreciate the compliments. I'm doing my very best. I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect, and we're all human. So I really appreciate the compliments. That really keeps me going. Okay. What if we don't have Facebook? Well, as I mentioned, you can also contact me through my website. Facebook's a little bit more personal one. I realize that certain people have boundaries. I do, my Facebook is private. I keep it for my friends, but you can still send me a message and I will respond. Okay, and don't troll me, please. Don't send any troll messages, because I have a nose for trolls, and yeah, it's Malik Kurai, you're absolutely right. You troll me, you might pay the price. Okay, yeah, let's see. What do you think of older books? Asks Lou Lasher, like Max Erva's books or the Chess Maze books. Okay, I have a very conflicted, and let's make this be the last question, because I also want to mention one last thing at the end. Okay, I have a conflicted relationship with master games, right, or with old books and old games, because you often hear this common wisdom that you need to study the classics. And I talk about this a lot, again, in my video series. I actually address this concept in depth. What do you need to do to improve? What do you study? What do you look for in games? Okay, so I can't talk about all of this in 2 minutes. That's why I produced this video series. So I'm trying to answer all of these questions that you might have that are not very well addressed in chess literature. Now, the short of it is that, yes, I think Erva's books, Lasker's books, Capablanca's book on chess fundamentals, they're all great. They're worth a read. But yes, they are slightly overrated, in the sense that it's not like they're badly written. It's just that chess has changed so much. It's like reading Via Mathematica, right? It's not a bad book. It's a fundamental work of physics that spawned, that basically gave birth to the entire field. But you don't see many classrooms reading Newton's work, right? And chess literature from the early 20th century is not quite as outdated, but still, you get the point. You need to balance it out. If you're reading a book by Erva, you also want to read something maybe a little bit more modern, like Mihail Marin, positional Grandmaster of Romania, has several very, very good books on positional chess and stuff like that. So just try to find some balance in your training in general. Okay. Last question, Jonathan Witchuk. Daniel, what do I look for when I study master games? This really has to be the last question. I have this emphasis, and the thing about the video series, right? What I try to do is give you, the viewer, if you buy my video series and you engage with it, I'm giving you a lot of opportunities to actually, I am silent for sometimes 30 seconds, a minute at a time. And those silences, those prompts are opportunities for you to think about a certain move or think about a certain plan. And sometimes there are opportunities for you to pause the video and really reflect on what the game you've just been looking at and the lessons that I've been teaching and how that applies to your own game. So the key is engagement and active learning. If you're passively taking information and nodding, then you're not getting as much, in my opinion. And that's true not only in chess, that's true in any field, as I can affirm from various exam experiences that I've had in school. If you just passively acquire material, it's not quite as effective of learning as is directed and active learning. Okay. All right. So one last thing that I'll do before I sign off is I'll do this. Well, actually, I'm debating whether, I think I'll save this actually for the video. I'll make this into a small surprise. One of my favorite games regarding piece placement, the topic of today's webinar, is Kasparov. It's Karpov-Kasparov, their last World Championship match game from, I believe, 1985. And in game 24, there was one move and one plan in particular that is so amazing. It encapsulates everything that I've talked about today and everything that that represents my philosophy regarding positional chess and piece placements. One move that Kasparov made that made my jaw drop when I saw it. And I know that I was planning to show this game today, but I figured, well, what better way to get you to buy my video than to say, well, you're going to have to watch that video to realize what that move is, why that move is so amazing, and to understand better how to make such moves in your own games. Okay, I know that's very cheap advertising. I feel like some commercial salesman. Get this lawnmower device that scrubs off grass from whatever, blah blah blah, and then get like one free. You know those commercials that take 30 minutes. Anyways, but you're gonna have to get my video series, and if you don't get my video series, I'm warning you, you will suffer the consequences. In any case, jokes aside, I think the time has come for me to for us to go our separate ways. I have to get back to my reading and homework and essay writing. But Jonathan Wojciechowski asked, when will you make that Kasparov video? Well, it is in my Naroditsky method series, in the chapter on piece placement, that you will find that game and that move. So with that said, I would love to keep answering questions, but unfortunately, I have to go. But folks, I would really like to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for joining me. This video will, of course, be on YouTube, but I appreciate the fact that you took time out of the day and in your busy lives to watch me talk and to watch me present my thoughts. This keeps me going, and I apologize for the brief technological difficulties we experienced in the middle. It was a completely honest mistake. I just clicked the X button on my Chrome window. So that's all that happened. I appreciate your understanding. Again, you can always contact me via Facebook, via email. You can contact iChess directly as well, if you have technical questions of any sort. This was great. I had a lot of fun making this webinar. And with that, I bid you folks goodbye. And I hope to see you at some tournament. And I wish you the very best of luck, whether or not you get my video series. But especially if you do, then I really wish you good luck. All right. Bye, everyone. And thanks again for attending. And thanks again for watching.